Yeah. Down on my side, it's like Slouchville.
I know mine kind of amazes just because I learned it out. I don't know.
All right. We'll call to order the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority Board of Directors meeting today, Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021 at 6:02 p.m. We'll go ahead with our roll call.
President Thompson,
Present.
Vice President Duffy,
Here.
Secretary Flores,
Here.
Director Anderson,
Here.
Director Kirkland,
Here.
Director Baker.
Here.
All right. Agenda item 3 is citizen communication. Do we have any cards filled out? All right. We'll move to item 4, approval of the minutes. 4A, consider approval of the BCRUA meeting minutes from August 25th, 2021.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. All right, we'll move to item 5, resolutions. 5A, consider a resolution approving the BCRUA quarterly investment report for April 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2021.
All right. Well, good evening, President and board members. My name is Kent Meredith. I'm the Finance Director here at the City of Cedar Park. And tonight I'm going to go over the quarterly investment report with you. It should be in your agenda packet. But I'll hit the major points that we need to talk about tonight and get through it and answer any questions that you may have. But as far as the quarter is from April through June of 2021, and just hitting on the big economic points that I want to cover with you tonight is the big thing that economists are looking at right now is price growth and inflation. That seems to be what's hitting the market the most and what's affecting the market the most at this time. And the big question is the inflation temporary or is it going to be long-term? And there's two pieces in order to answer that question. Production costs is rising very sharply because of the supply chain disruptions that you've experienced. If you're on Amazon, you're looking to buy something, you'll see that it's temporary out of stock or on back order, and you don't know if you're ever going to get it. But this supply chain disruption seems to be temporary in the eyes of economists. But another factor that's affecting inflation is the wage pressure. So it's the labor market and wages. So getting people to come to work and pay them the wages that they need to be paid in order to keep those people more permanently is causing a longer range effect on inflation. So we have supply cost and wages that are affecting inflation. But regardless of whether inflation is temporary or long-term, inflation signals a strengthening economy. So as far as manufacturing is concerned, manufacturers are seeing the largest jump in manufacturing in 42 years, despite in spite of supply chain disruptions. The housing market, you've heard about the housing market. It is as amazing as it can be right now. And but now I wanted to just kind of jump into the portfolio itself, and that's also in your packet. We have $29.5 million in our investment portfolio. $7.2 million of that is in the construction funds. $6.5 million is in the debt service fund. $12.1 million is in the escrow accounts. And $3.7 million is in the operating funds. The construction funds are invested with Techstar, which is a local government fund investment pool, and a money market account. Round Rock has some of their construction funds invested in a money market account. The debt service fund is invested in Techstar. The escrow account is also invested in Techstar. And the operating fund is invested in Techstar and in Wells Fargo. So looking at the entire portfolio as a whole, for this quarter, we earned 0.049%, which is slightly under 1/2% as our return on the investments, which is very low. But when you compare it to the yield curve, which is also in your packet, it looks like this. it's about what you can expect with our shorter-term investments that we're allowed to have according to our investment policy. And I'm going to come back to this chart when we talk about the investment policy, so you might want to either memorize that chart or have it handy for our next agenda item. But just so you know that all the investments that we currently have for BCRUA are all in conformance with the BCRUA's investment policy. And that concludes my presentation on the quarterly investment report, pending any questions you may have.
Board, any questions?
So can you just remind me the Techstar in general, I mean, what that is? I'm assuming that's just a pool of funds?
It's a local government fund investment pool. It's available for any cities in the state of Texas to invest in. There's a few, the Tex Pool is one. There's a few of them out there, and we're invested in one of those called Techstar.
Thank you.
It's a big fund.
All right, and then we'll move on to item 5B, consider a resolution approving the BCRUA investment policy and strategy.
Okay, this item is, I'm sorry.
Would you accept the resolution? I want to get a vote on it.
Have action on
the
5A
Yes,
before
we
you
can pass
move
a
on.
resolution.
Okay,
Let's stay with 5A.
okay. All right, do we have a motion to approve the resolution for 5A?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and all those in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? All right, the resolution is approved and the motion carries, and then we'll move on to 5B.
Okay, again, I'm Kent Meredith, the Finance Director here at the City of Cedar Park. And what you have in your packet tonight is the investment and strategy policy for BCRUA. Just so you know, each year the board is required to take action on approving the investment strategy and policy, and that is required by the Public Funds Investment Act, which is a state statute. So the packet that you have with the investment policy governs all the funds, and it covers the operating funds, construction funds, escrow funds, and the debt service fund. The policy lists all the type of investments that we can make with those funds and the maximum percentages of each of the investments to the total portfolio. That requires us to diversify the portfolio. The primary objective of the policy is to ensure safety, liquidity, diversification, and market yield. The board has designated the general manager and each of the finance directors for the cities to act as investment officers for the board. Each investment officer must receive the stated hours of training in order to maintain his or her credentials as investment officers. So the policy that you have in your packet is basically the exact same policy as you all approved last year. I'm going to cover some of the minor changes, and there's one major change to the policy that I'll go over with you. The new policy, as the red line version that you have in your packet, it now lists, there's a list of training sources that are available to the investment officers to use for their training, their annual or biannual training. That list was not in the policy last year, but it is included in the policy this year. There's a few small editorial changes, some language changes. The red line version that you have in front of you includes those smaller changes. But the most significant change to the policy is the weighted average maturity, which is the WAM, for the construction funds and the escrow funds. So those two funds, the construction funds and the escrow funds, have a change to their weighted average maturity. It's gone from 1 year to 2 years, okay? The other funds, the operating fund and the operating fund and the debt service fund remain the same at 1 year with the 1 year WAM. So what that means is, back to this model, this weighted average maturity, this allows us to invest a little bit further out on the yield curve so we can take advantage of the higher interests that are available in the out years. And this becomes very important as we finance the deepwater intake with the bond proceeds from the Texas Water Development Board. So when we receive those funds in November, this will allow us to invest those funds for a longer term and get a little bit better interest to offset the inflation that we're experiencing. So that's probably that is the biggest change to the investment policy. And finally, the last change that we made was we included the broker-dealer list in with the policy. In the past, the broker-dealer list was a separate document, and we were required to get both of those approved by the board. This year, we've combined the two into one document to have you approve, both the investment policy and the broker-dealer list all at one time. So those are the only big changes to the policy.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions?
I had a question. So on the 2-year construction type of timeframe, that makes, I think that makes sense, obviously, as we're further away from construction, you put it in 2-year money, and then as we get closer, will we ladder that, take some of it out and put it in 1-year money, or as we need to get
Yes,
access
that's
to
a
it?
very good point. Laddering these maturities is a concept that I didn't talk about tonight, but I probably should have. What a laddering does is it allows you to span those investments out into, longer term investments, shorter, all the way until 1-day investments. So yes, that's exactly what we will do. Because once we establish that 2-year WAM, we can ladder those maturities out a little bit further. And that way, we can structure that so when we start issuing the invoices for these construction projects, we have the money available and still have money invested in longer term, for when those invoices are due later on during the construction.
Thank you.
Good point.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the investment policy and strategy?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Very good. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll move on to item 5C, consider a resolution approving the supplemental contract number 16 with Walker Partners for Phase 1C Water Treatment Plant Expansion and Phase 2 Land Rights and Stakeholder Coordination Project.
Well, last month, I briefed you on the 36-inch underwater raw water pipeline and an engineering evaluation that we wanted to do to determine how to proceed with that line. And this information will be helpful as the operating committee and the board discuss moving forward with the Phase 1D water treatment plant expansion. So we have Aaron Archer here, our project manager from Walker Partners, to discuss and describe the this supplemental contract.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Archer with Walker Partners, and I want to kind of walk you through the scope of services today. Once we completed that repair of the underwater pipeline, we then started spending some time working with another forensic engineering firm, WJE, to better understand the underlying contributing factors to that failure. And we have some draft results that we're reviewing from WJE that indicate that the pipeline has inadequate support. So in order for that line to be reliable until we bring the Phase 2 project online, and the timing of that is around mid-2027, we want to look at some ways to improve the reliability of that line. And there's 2 different approaches that we've put in this scope of services to do that. One is to evaluate enhancing pipe support along that pipeline to prevent a similar type of failure episode. And another is to evaluate the construction of a parallel pipeline adjacent to the existing pipeline. So the purpose of this scope is, its primary focus is to look at both of those 2 alternatives and put together a planning level type evaluation and cost so we can understand what the next steps would be to make sure that that pipeline can reliably provide water until we bring that deep water intake online. There's also an additional scope task in here where we're going to look at the existing raw water intake barge and evaluate its capacity to provide water beyond the current Phase 1C water treatment plant capacity. We do know that intake barge can provide beyond the 32.5 MGD that is required for treatment at the water plant right now. And we need to do some field testing to determine how much beyond that it can provide to the expanded Phase 1D water treatment plant. And then lastly, you guys may remember probably back in May, the last time I talked about the pipeline repair. Once a contractor had that pipeline repaired, there was one joint among the pieces of pipe that they replaced down there that has a very small leak on it. Probably the way they quantify it is maybe about half of a garden hose flow. They've been going down and monitoring that weekly, and we're about to have them transition to monitoring monthly because it seems to be holding well and is stable. Nothing's really changing. But we do want to evaluate if there's some good alternatives to address that small leak. We'd like to implement those during the winter months when demands are low. So that's kind of the last element of the scope. I'd be happy to address any questions or comments.
Do you have an estimated time of how long you think it will take them to finish the scope and provide the feedback?
We're estimating that we can complete the scope of services in about 8 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question, and if you don't have the answer, it's fine. On the supports, do we know if it was the spans too far, or the type of supports, the incorrect type of support, or is that all to be determined at this point?
Some of that is still being fleshed out in the draft report. There's a number of possible contributing factors, but we need to look a little bit more at that.
Any other feedback or questions?
I'll just add in terms of the timing of Phase 1D and moving the board considering moving forward with the water plant expansion. There are really two items that the board and the operating committee are going to need to decide. One is, the operating committee has directed Walker Partners to develop a scope for the engineering design. So we'll bring that to you for consideration as soon as the operating committee has had a chance to receive it and recommend it. And additionally, we will need a master contract amendment to add Phase 1D. You have seen that recently when we added Phase 2 engineering and construction to that one. So we'll be preparing that and bringing it to you as well. So there'll be two actions that will be required by the board and then the subsequent actions by the city councils.
Thank you. All right, do we have a motion on 5C?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of approving the supplemental contract number 16 with Walker Partners for Phase 1C water treatment, plan expansion, and Phase 2 land rights and stakeholder coordination project, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. And item 6, we will move to executive session. We will adjourn. It's at 6:20. Six p.m. And on item 6A, there is no action that needs to be taken. And we'll move on to item 7, director closing comments. All right, we'll start with Vice President Ann Duffy.
Well, thank you for all the work per usual and enjoyed our conversation and questions tonight. Thanks.
All right, and Secretary Renee Flores.
Good night. Thank you.
All right, and Citizen Director Jason Anderson. All right, and Citizen Director Mel Kirkland.
Just want to thank all the staff and Aaron for all the work that you've done so far. We appreciate everything you've done and all the time and effort it takes for us to be up here to meet. So thank you very much.
All right, and Citizen Director Matthew Baker.
I'll just duplicate the same information. Thanks, staff. It's a complicated, big project, and you are doing a great job, so thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I guess I'm last, so thank you guys all for all of your help and all of your effort in keeping us up to date on what's going on. Really appreciate it. And if there's nothing further, we will adjourn at 6:58 p.m.